Hey everybody, today I'm reviewing Ultimate X-Men issue number 1 by Peach Momoko. Originally I did say that I wouldn't read this comic, but I decided to give it a shot anyways. And where normally I'd give a recap of the Ultimate Universe at the beginning of the video, I don't feel like it's at all necessary to read or understand this story. In fact, it feels very detached, like you could read it as a standalone universe almost. But Ultimate X-Men issue number 1 focuses on a young middle schooler in Japan named Hisako. And she's kind of a loner. She is somewhat ostracized and bullied by the other girls because they think she's weird and depressed. And we learn throughout the story that she used to have a friend named Tsubasa who it seems like committed suicide. And she feels a sense of loneliness as well as maybe some guilt over what happened to him. At one point while she's at school, she receives a note that tells her to meet someone at a temple. And when she goes there, she meets this evil spirit-like being who tells her that it knows about Tsubasa and hands her a talisman that looks like a small version of the armor construct that you'll see later on. And the power of the armor later activates to save her from a car crash, and then she'll later use it to, I don't think she kills, but she defeats this evil spirit. And I say evil spirit because it does torment her regarding Tsubasa's death. It claims to have known him and to have turned his back or its back on Tsubasa when he was alive, but it also vows to curse those around her and those who were in the life of Tsubasa that ignored him, including Tsubasa's former coach who apparently bullied him at one point, and he ends up hanging himself. Now, this spirit almost seems like the Shadow King from the mainstream Marvel universe, but that could definitely be a stretch because other than just looking like an evil spirit, there's not a whole lot of similarities. I'm also not entirely certain whether Hisako's armor abilities come from the talisman or if she has inherent mutant powers and the talisman simply triggered them. And that's one thing I want to be clear about is that I don't know much, if anything, about the character of Armor in the mainstream Marvel universe, so I don't know how close this is to the original adaptation. But the story ends with Hisako realizing that something evil has been let loose and that she'll probably have to face it from now on. Now, if you couldn't tell from the art style, this is basically manga in comic book form or a comic book in manga form, and it certainly has some horror elements to it. Now, I haven't really read any horror manga. It's not really my thing, but I thought the story was pretty good. I think I might actually continue with it because there are certain things that I appreciate, like getting a look into Japanese culture. I'm not sure if this is representative of modern day Japanese culture for middle school students or if it's representative of what culture was like when Peach Momoko was that age. But something that I really liked was that at the very end of the comic, there's a lexicon that explains to you the cultural significance of some of the things that you see. And that's something you see every once in a while in manga, where they'll keep in certain cultural aspects that an American wouldn't necessarily understand, but then there'll be a little editor's note at the bottom of the page that explains it to you. So instead of trying to outright replace the cultural thing, much like they used to do in Pokemon, if you ever watched the American version of Pokemon as a kid, they used to say that the rice balls were donuts, which even as a child back then, I didn't understand because obviously those weren't donuts, and I don't understand why it would have been difficult for us to understand what a rice ball is. The point being, it's cool to see that they're willing to share the culture and also not dumb it down for Americans, that they're willing to simply explain what these things are so that we have an understanding of it. And that's something that I really appreciated as sort of an overlap from manga. But that also reflects my one criticism, and it's a big criticism of the comic. The story was good, the art was fine, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. The problem is the medium. And like I said, it definitely comes off like a horror manga. And the problem is that if you're a Marvel fan, especially if you're a new Marvel fan, and you came into this thinking that this new Ultimate Universe was going to be more accessible for you, especially if you come from typically reading manga, but you pick up this title and it says Ultimate X-Men number 1, I have to be honest, this doesn't in any way resemble the X-Men. You know, you can pick up any X-Men issue number 1 from any decade. In fact, if you go back to the early 2000s and you compare the original Ultimate X-Men number 1 to the original 60s version, there are obviously some differences because it was made decades later. However, you could instantly tell this was an X-Men comic. It's not the same way with Ultimate X-Men number 1. And I'm not saying it's a bad story because it's not. The problem is that it just doesn't fit with the medium. This is a manga that simply uses a character from the Marvel Universe. It isn't a superhero comic. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying horror manga or slice of life stories, but you have to understand what the medium is about and why it draws in an audience. And I think it's kind of a bait and switch for both manga fans and X-Men fans, especially for new ones who are thinking that this is something that will help them get into Marvel Comics, because this isn't the norm for superhero comics. So if you're coming into it thinking, this is cool, I like this manga style for a Marvel comic, well, you're not going to get more of this because it just doesn't reflect the medium. And if you came into this like myself and you're an X-Men fan and you realize like this is kind of an interesting story, but it really has nothing to do with X-Men other than the fact that they picked a minor X-Man as the main character. And so that's the main problem I have with that is I know Peach Momoko has done some Marvel comics before, but I just don't think that mixing the mediums works. Manga and Western superhero comics are different. Even superhero comics from the West and manga that focuses on superheroes are different. And as I mentioned at the beginning, due to all the factors that I just mentioned, it really feels completely detached from the rest of the Ultimate Universe. And it makes me wonder why they made this a part of it in the first place. Like, why couldn't Peach Momoko have made her own alternate universe X-Men story that's just its own thing? And because of the art style as well as the type of story it is, I don't know how you organically mix this in with other stories and other characters within the Ultimate Universe. So I'm going to stick with it for a while, but honestly, it's hard to recommend it to new readers looking for X-Men. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about this comic because I'm sure it'll be divisive for a lot of people. I'm sure it'll be disappointing for some people. I know a lot of people are going to like it, but I wonder if you're liking it simply because it's a manga style superhero comic or if there are other reasons and what you think about how the X-Men are kind of being used as a entry point for manga readers, but in such a way that it might be seen as a bait and switch at some point. But if you enjoy my content, I would appreciate it if you would hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so that you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.